Hello, welcome to episode 14 of the Aim High and Achieve podcast. Today I'm delighted to be joined by Paul Mungeam. Paul, for over 25 years, has excelled as a cameraman, specialising in adventure TV. Over the course of his career, he's travelled to over 95 different countries, filming with all the major broadcasters and working alongside the likes of Ben Stiller, Will Ferrell, Grylls, Kate Winslet, to name just a few. Following his demand in adventure TV, Mungo stepped out from behind the camera to front the show Expedition Mungo. He has also published 2 books, Mungo the Cameraman and Mungo Living the Dream. We're away. Paul, it's great to talk to you. Thanks very much for joining me on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
By the way, you gotta stop calling me Paul.
I know. Well, I don't feel like maybe we'll get to Mungo in a bit. I didn't want to go.
No one calls me Paul anymore except for my dad.
Okay.
And I don't remember you being there at the birth, are you?
No, I didn't want to go Mungo straight away like I'm your best mate from the first
No,
minute.
it's fine. No, call me Mungo, mate. I prefer it.
Mungo. Okay. So where does Mungo come from? Obviously, it's a take on your second name, yeah?
Yeah, my surname is Mungeam, Paul Mungeam. And I lived in Australia for 4 years, around kind of 18 to 22. And as you know, yeah, they love nothing better than to give people nicknames. So very quickly, Mungeam became Mungo. Oh, g'day, Mungo. And it kind of stuck, really. So I like to liken it to Sting or Bono.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. No, but it just stuck. And then everybody in the TV industry knows me as Mungo. And even some of my mates or certainly colleagues don't actually know my real name. They just know me as Mungo. So yeah.
Mungeam is not it's not a common name. I don't think.
No, Mungeam was, as far as we know, originally French or Flemish. So Mungeam, and we came. My uncle is a doctor of history actually, and he traced it back to coming over, kind of William the Conqueror and all that years ago. So we came over from the mainland to England. Yeah,
crazy. Yeah. My wife has just done a DNA heritage test. Her surname is Kilcourse, so straight away you go, that's Irish. It's got to be, Irish, and I think her family were from County Mayo. So she did the DNA test, and it turns out that she's something like half or 1/3 Scandinavian, which is actually where we've moved to. So we moved from Manchester to Norway 8 or 10 years ago, or whatever. And she's almost come back full circle on herself. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah.
But Paul, Mungo, sorry. I obviously wanted you on as a guest on the podcast because I absolutely loved Expedition Mungo, which for those who don't know, go and check it out. It's a great TV show on. I see it on Discovery now because I have Discovery Plus over in Norway. So. Yeah, it's a great show, and it's from a genre that I really love, and it's like the River Monsters kind of Jeremy Wade. I first started watching that series years and years and years ago, and it's kind of along the same, I don't know the TV word, but it's the same kind of genre as the way that you film the show. Yeah. Was that something you were conscious of?
Yeah, I mean, look, the way it works is that the broadcaster puts out, so Animal Planet and Discovery, who are kind of the same thing. Animal Planet are owned by Discovery, so they put out that River Monsters was coming to an end after dozens of series. And they were looking for a replacement for it. So they kind of put it out to tender, and then there was a production company in London called Blast. And I had a friend who was working there, and he said, "Look, we want to put you forward for doing a show about you being a cameraman, but kind of stepping in front of the camera and talking about some of the stories that you've experienced, in your travels, etc., etc. Would you be up for it?" And I kind of went, "Well, I don't know if I can do it, but I'm open to giving it a go. So I was driving my Land Rover Defender around London at the time, and he had his iPhone, and he just started filming me and chatting to me and asking me questions. And then he cut that together and sent it off to Discovery and said, look, here's the idea for the show. In fact, it was a different show before it got commissioned. That's another story. I'll come to that. But here's the guy we'd like to put forward, Mungo, who's a well-seasoned cameraman, Bear's right-hand man, Bear Grylls. What do you think? And they just went, love it. Tell us more. And can we meet him? They gave us a load of money to do a proper sizzle tape. So we went over to the Amazon for about a week to go and shoot over there and handle some big snakes and just put me in different environments and different situations to see how I handled it. And of course, all of that for me was pretty run of the mill from what I knew already. So I was very comfortable doing that. And then one thing led to another. And, finally, it's like all these things, it's like when you're trying to buy a house, isn't it? You have to jump through a million hoops before you finally get those keys in your hand. And in the same way, when you get approached about a show on TV, it takes a long time before you actually get on the plane and go to shoot it. So but that's how it happens. So it's kind of through friends. But it's good. I mean, it's interesting because when it started off, we had a different idea about what we wanted to do. What we wanted to do originally was an idea about making a series on where animals and humans have conflict. So, for example, where you see polar bears are starting to encroach on towns and stuff because they scavenge, and because they've got food available to them, they come into the communities, and obviously they're bloody dangerous. So that causes issues, and then there's conflict. So do they cull them? Do they shoot them? Do they scare them off? What do you do? And this has happened worldwide, where in the Amazon rainforest, a lot of the Amazon is being cut down on a rapid basis for logging and farming, as in cattle farming. And so, again, there's conflict of the wildlife and man again. And there are some incredible stories in South Africa and Namibia where some of the refugees who are coming down from northern Africa are actually crossing over illegally into the Kruger National Park in South Africa. And there was a pride of lions that were basically, it was like a free meal for them. So all these refugees were coming over, and some of the rangers in the Kruger Park were finding, multiple times they were finding shoes and bits of humans left behind, but the shoes had feet in them still. Because the lions had eaten people. So it's pretty full on. And anyway, but fascinating stories and a real issue of life and humans. Anyway, so that's originally what we went in with, and they kind of went, oh yeah, it sounds great. But then the big bosses decided that they wanted to be a bit more, they didn't want to risk moving away from river monsters. They wanted to make it a bit more mythological, of which I was kind of up for, but I did think it's a bit like being asked to go out and shoot Santa Claus. If something doesn't exist, then how are you going to shoot it and make a story about it?
I was gonna make a point about that, because one thing that I think is so great about the show is that whilst you have the sort of cryptozoology aspect of it, it's not that. So it's not that when you go on YouTube and you put Bigfoot in and you have these sort of wacky guys who are, out in the middle of nowhere doing witchcraft and all that. It's not like that. It is based on real facts. Actual.
Yeah. So the way it kind of worked out for us was, okay, well, if that's the case, then we revisited stories that we knew of and had heard of, where there had been conflict within people groups and some form of animal, be it a mythological beast or whatever, or a tribal spiritual belief. And then we'd go and investigate it and basically say, well, if it's not a dog-headed pig monster in Namibia, then what could it be? So then we explore the local wildlife and say, well, the injuries were this, that's more kind of linked to a boa constrictor or a hyena or whatever it is. And it was in Namibia, actually, where we got our our one and only result.
Yeah.
Yeah, where we actually solved it as being the brown hyena.
Yeah, I mean, I love the one with the snake because there was no doubt that in recent history there must have been huge anacondas and Titanoboa, and there is a crypto thing about the dinosaur that was still in the Congo. I don't know if you've ever heard of this one. There was still sort of reports of there could be something in the Congo. It's so massive and it's sort of never been explored. So
is that the crocodilian one, like the Postozuchus?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah,
it was an old Vice documentary from sort of like when YouTube sort of first came out. There was a Vice documentary about this dinosaur in the Congo, and going back a very long time ago. So there must be. The world is so huge. There could be one last thing to discover,
right.
and I kind of love the fact that you take the real aspect of it.
Yeah,
but also there's that 1% chance, especially with the big snake. There is a 1% chance there could be something still yet to be discovered.
Well, and obviously, sorry, did you see the Liberia episode?
Yeah.
Because the Liberian one was exactly along those lines. And we even spoke to I think it's a University of Miami, I think, or Florida, and there was a crocodilian expert. He'd spent his whole academic life looking into this, and he just said, who are we to say that these things don't exist? I mean, humans love to think that we know everything, but the truth is that's ridiculous. And one of the whole purposes of science is admitting that we don't know everything. Do you know what I mean? So the whole point of science is to look and to try and discover and work it all out. But there's so much we don't know. And when you look at Liberia, which has been ravaged by sorry, I'm just going to put my phone on to voice message. Ravaged by civil war, but then also by Ebola. Deep forest, and that neighbours the DRC, the Republic of Congo. There are people in there who say that they've seen something which matches the Postozuchus, which is like the kind of crocodile but stands more upright, sort of thing.
Okay.
And I interviewed people and said to them, but couldn't it have been a crocodile? And they kind of looked at me and said, look, we know what crocodiles are. It's not a crocodile, So in places like that where it really is still an unknown wilderness, and men haven't explored every inch of it, and it took us 3 days to get there by plane, by 4x4, and by motorbike, and on foot.
Wow!
It's in the middle of nowhere. So who are we to say?
It's like, have you seen the Forrest Galante Extinct or Alive show?
No.
That is really good, and it's it's a similar lines to what you do.
Yeah,
where he is looking for basically animals that are extinct or alive, and he has some success. He finds a couple, one in the Amazon, a crocodile or an alligator in a caiman. He finds a caiman in the Amazon. He finds, and also there's the Sowler that he finds in Indonesia, which. No, he doesn't find it. Sorry. The last one died, and they go into this cave in Indonesia that's just, man has never set foot there. There could be anything there. But that's a great show it's along the same lines as yours. It's really good. But how did you find going from behind the camera to then having the confidence to be in front of the camera? Was that something that naturally came to you? Or
to a degree, I mean, in the past, I've kind of, I've been in front of the camera a couple of times before. I did a thing with Charley Boorman where I travelled from Ireland to Sydney for BBC Two over land and sea. So that was just three of us doing that. So I spent a bit of time doing video diaries and stuff like that on the journey, which took us 4 months. We did like 25 countries in 4 months using 112 forms of transport, going from Ireland all the way over to Sydney, Australia, not losing not by flying, but by land and sea. It was amazing. But then also from a kind of technical experience point of view, if you if you imagine, I've worked with cameras for 30 plus years, and I've worked with presenters and people who are new to it. So I know what looks good on camera because I've been looking at it for so many years.
Yeah.
And the secret is so simple. The secret is if you can be yourself, and if you're confident enough just to say, I'm just going to be myself, and like it or lump it, you can criticize me or you don't like me or whatever. I don't really care. Then you'll come across okay, and I'm confident that will come across authentically. So yeah, I mean, I didn't find it difficult, to be honest. I mean, I guess the only thing was, I suppose sometimes you can hide behind the camera. If you're having an off day, or you kind of you're just feeling a bit down, or you're knackered, you've been away from home, or you're sick. At one point in Liberia, I got really sick, and literally in between kind of pieces to camera, I was vomiting, and then literally kind of hang on a minute, spewing, and then going back, and then carrying on. And so I think on that front, it's harder in a way, but it's physically a lot less harder than having to lug camera kit around. Although we did do some of that, to be fair. I've filmed some of it as well.
I saw in one, I can't remember which one it was exactly, but you put the you get back behind the camera, and you're just like a little kid on Christmas Day. I could just see it in your eyes. You kind of like got the camera back, and you were like, yeah. You could just see the passion in your face, and then I think a bloody boat tips over or something, and you have to like go and rescue everybody, and it's like,
that's right.
And it just made me think of like it's hard enough to film in a controlled environment. How do you sort of manage filming in that kind of environment? Everybody's sort of tempers might be getting flayed. It's hot. You've been going all day. You're a tight-knit crew. How important is it to pick the right crew, because it only takes one little bad apple in that crew to throw everything. So how do you sort of go about that side of things in those environments?
Well, I think these are great questions, Steve. Really good questions. I think number one, crew is everything. Your team is everything. And you're exactly right. If there's one bad apple, it sours everything. I mean, I've been there and done it over the years. And that's why ultimately you choose your mates. So that's why they say, the old adage that media is not what you know, but who you know. It really is. But that's for good reason. Because if you are, especially with what I do, if you're stuck out in the middle of nowhere with somebody who gets homesick or just can't handle living in a hammock for weeks on end, or can't deal with the insects, or just the pressure of being on call the whole time, then it's a nightmare, and it can ruin the experience for everyone. So you've got to be of a certain character. And I know for a start, I'm under no illusions that there are far better cameramen than me technically, but I know that I've got a really good temperament for that kind of thing, because I quite get off on it. I quite enjoy the endurance. I quite like the hardship. I love the challenge of it. It's like endurance sports, isn't it? Not everybody wants to go and run an ultra marathon, but some people just love it. And it's just part of you. So if you are one of those people, those are exactly the people that you want. And even those people, of course, you get tired and you get angry. And I've got a real problem with hunger. So if I'm hungry, I'm horrible.
Me too.
and often when I meet a new director for the first time, I say to him, I'll be fine. Just feed me. If you feed me, I'll be eating out of your hand. But if you don't, there's going to be trouble. And there are a few directors who will pay testament to that, I'm sure. But a team is everything. And it is hard, without a doubt. But there's always an end in sight. If it's 3 weeks or a month or 6 weeks or whatever, it's only a limited amount of time, isn't it? And I think a bit of hardship is good for everyone, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even if you take compare it to, I mean, in my kind of my sort of day job, not so much now, but I would be away from home for a week or a couple of weeks, and if you were with the wrong couple of people when you were doing an away job or something, it was pretty hellish, and it just made things not very enjoyable. Whereas if you were with somebody who was the same as you, it was okay, albeit, and that's kind of one thing I love to explore on this sort of podcast is people who are basically doing the things they love to do. And my daughter's 15 now, and she's looking at career paths, and I keep explaining to her, now, if I could go back and pick exactly what I want to do, I wouldn't pick my career now. I do it because it's okay pay, and I've done it for 25 years.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't choose it again. So now it's a crucial time that you pick what you're passionate about. And you're a classic example. You're passionate about your day job, which is super important, and your passion comes through in the show. And obviously, as you're talking now, you can hear it, How did you get sort of into it to start with? Was it something you were thinking about in school, in high school, or was it accidental? Or
I totally fell into it. So, and coming back to your daughter, isn't it ridiculous that our education system kind of requires kids of that age to be making lifelong steering decisions? It's mental, isn't it?
Yeah.
Although I suppose you've got to steer towards something.
Yeah, Olivia is she's in a kind of sports college at the moment because she was a very good swimmer. So she was a high-level swimmer in Norway. So she went to a sports college where it was focused on sport.
Yeah.
She leaves that college now. It works a bit different in Norway. So she will leave that college, go to like a sixth form. Sorry, she will leave that school, go to essentially what's a sixth form college where she's just doing general schooling for 2 years. Then I think she'll probably take a year away and then go to university. But it works a lot different to the UK system. So they're a lot more general here. They don't force you into a way, but they have debates about it. What are good career paths to go to. If you want to go into nursing, then you go to this particular school. If you want to go into IT, you go to this particular school. So I don't know if it's better than the UK. I'm not really too. I remember my time. I remember when I was 15 or 16, and they were like, "What do you want to be right now?" And I was like, a solicitor, because I didn't know, and I thought that's going to be great. So I started going down that road.
Right.
And then it was like, no, this is a hell of a lot of work. I don't know if I want to do this for 7 years. Yeah. And I started working with my father, who was involved with Elevate, and then here I am now, 25 years later. So yeah, it's interesting. But going back to yourself, how did you sort of drop into it?
Well, it's funny because I remember when you were talking about what you want to do. I remember I was lining up with my mate Stephen Laslett, and we were lining up outside this classroom for careers education or careers advice. And we just thought, this is a joke. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I liked girls and rugby, and that was it.
Yeah.
And so I went in there, and Stephen went in first, and he came out with a smirk on his face, and then I went in after him, and I went in there, there was like this guy in a brown suit with this kind of ashen face, very serious older guy, and he said to me, "So Mungeam, what is it? What do you want to do, kind of, for your chosen career?" And I said, well, I just thought I'd take the piss a bit. So I said, well, yeah, I'm thinking about becoming a stuntman. Yeah, just kind of reel him in. And he went, he just looked at me and shook his head. And he went, why doesn't that surprise me when the guy in front of you said that he wanted to be a cowboy? And we were from Tunbridge Wells in Kent. It's like, for us, it was a joke. And none of us knew what we wanted to do. I was good at two things at school. I was good at art and I was good at sport. So I knew I was hopeless academically. I had no interest in it at all. I learned by pressing buttons, not by reading books. And so I knew that I had to play to my strengths. And I thought either I'll probably join the army or something, or I'll end up in prison. I don't know. I don't know what my future is. I didn't go to a great school, so I didn't have much future laid out for me. But then I ended up going to art college, and I studied fine art. So I was a painter, oil painting and stuff like that, which I loved. Went originally to do graphic design, but then couldn't stand all the kind of, everything had to be so perfect. And this old art tutor, Brian, once said to me, come in at one lunchtime, and he gave me this big blank canvas, a palette full of paints, and he refused to give me a brush. He gave me a palette knife, which is like a butter knife, and he just said, just have a play for the next hour. And I just started throwing paint onto the canvas, and I thought, this is great. So I ended up studying fine art after that. And then when I left there, I finished my studies in Australia as well. I then moved to Australia, to Sydney, just because I could. Why not? So I went and finished my studies there. And then I worked for a charity for a bit. And then eventually I ended up working as a youth worker in a church in South Kensington in London, not really knowing what to do with myself. So I was just killing time, really. And it was there that I met a guy who shared an office with another guy who's Simon Niblett, who's a well-renowned documentary cameraman. And Si was just like, he was like the big brother that I never had. I had 3 older sisters, 3 ugly sisters. And then, and Simon was just like this kind of, he was doing David Attenborough documentaries, traveling the world. He had a Land Rover, he had a motorbike. And I just thought, this guy's living my dream. And in fact, I've written a couple of books, and one of my books, the first book I wrote, an autobiography, I dedicated it to Simon, because he was the one who gave me my entire career, which then gave me my life. Because what I saw in Simon was that he was doing the whole kind of action man thing, which really appealed to me because of my physicality, but also the cameras tweaked my creativity. So it ticked 2 boxes that I had. So I just thought, well, this is what I've got to give it a bash at. So I worked with him for only about, I don't know, probably about 18 months. And then he said, I think you're ready to kind of go and shoot, by yourself now. And he started to pass on work to me that he no longer wanted to do because it was a bit below him, but it was kind of beyond my years of any experience. So really quickly, I was shooting things like Blue Peter videos. I was doing a bit of stuff for Children's BBC Newsround. I was doing sport. And then my big break really was doing a Lonely Planet documentary for Channel 4, where I went out and did a documentary off the beaten track. And this is how green I was, Steve. I went into the production house, the production company's offices, and they said, well, we're queuing up this shoot to go to Cambodia. And I thought, I said in my head, talk about sliding doors, because if I'd said what I thought, I probably wouldn't be here today. But in my head, I thought, that'd be brilliant because I've never been to Africa before. Cambodia, for those of you who don't know, is in Southeast Asia. Anyway, so fortunately, my mouth stayed shut. And I ended up getting the job. I blagged my way in to go into Cambodia. And then the whole world of travel documentary just like smacked me in the face. And it was like an awakening. And I just thought, this is it for me. It suits me. It suits my creativity. It suits my personality. It suits all the things that I can do within my comfort zone, and a little bit out, which I like of my comfort zone. And, for many, many years, I just traveled the world. I used to go into Pilot Productions, who produced it. And every year they'd give me a list of 50 countries and say, where do you want to go? And I'll just go, there. And then if it all worked out diary-wise, I would just go. So I kind of broke my teeth in TV doing, extreme travel documentaries, extreme travel. And then I met Bear 17 years ago in the Sahara Desert, doing his first ever TV show, which was Escape to the Legion for Channel 4.
I remember this. I remember it. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where I met Bear, and I shot that along with a few other mates. And then Bear and I just got on like a house on fire. And then he very, very kindly, and I'm incredibly grateful to him that he just let me kind of ride the wave with him of where he's got to now. So I've been working with Bear for 17 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've got the scars to prove it.
Yeah, and that was actually he was right at the forefront of sort of this Survivor Man, which eventually came. He was actually groundbreaking in terms of what he was doing.
Yeah, the only other person at the time who was doing anything like it was Ray Mears.
Ray Mears, yeah.
And of course, Ray, Ray's he's a master at what he does. There's no doubt about that. But he's just not very charismatic.
He's the polar opposite of Grylls, isn't it? Ray Mears is methodical, is slow, every move is
Whereas Bear, and I think this is where it kind of comes into luck, really, or fate. But what happened with Bear was he just realized that his style was far more gregarious. It was far more kind of charismatic, and it kind of just went. I mean, it just fitted perfectly into the American market, and the Americans had no one like it. They didn't have even Ray Mears, So then this Bear character comes along. He's ex-Eton. He's ex-Special Forces. He's the posh boy who's as hard as nails. And who's that in real terms? That's like James Bond. And the Americans love anything to do with kind of the eccentric Brits. And the fact that he's like, super posh, super privileged, but also super hard, and he'll eat elephant shit and whatever. They just loved him.
Yeah, he is the stereotypical sort of way that the British Special Forces are sort of revered and looked at.
Yeah.
And obviously similar. I'm a big fan of Aldo Kane. I've sort of read his book, listened to his book, which is a really good book. And he sort of got into, if you listen to his book, I listened to it on audio, but he got into it in a similar way. He was working on the oil rigs. He was a rope access guy. And then all of a sudden, he being a rope access, he could hold a camera and then blah, blah, blah. And then before you know it, he sort of fell into it. So I'm really intrigued about how people sort of, you don't know you're passionate at 16, but eventually somehow all these sort of roads lead to the point where you end up where you are. I think it's really interesting.
Yeah. And I think, when I look back now, I mean, before I got into TV, which was definitely, as I said, it was, it suited me and I suited it. So that was almost like that serendipity kind of moment, where I just thought, this is awesome. My whole life, I'd kind of lived in 2 year kind of stages. So I'd go and I studied art for 2 years. Then I went to Australia for 2 years. Then I did youth work for 2 years. I did youth work for another 2. Then I worked for Simon for just under 2 years. And then I started camera work. And then 2 years in, I kind of thought, I want to do another 2 years of this. Do you know what I mean? Because this is really floating my boat and I can see it going places. But it is interesting. I mean, I know Aldo. I've met him a few times. Lovely guy. He worked behind the scenes on TV stuff. And then in the same way, kind of got the break of, could you try something in front or would you? And then, I think if you're the character who's like, I'll give it a go, see what happens.
It was on the Steve Backshall series, wasn't it? That's right. Yeah, it was on the Steve Backshall series, which again is filmed quite similar to your show. And I really like seeing the kind of background of how the crew are, and one thing I've always wondered is being a cameraman, how much work is there behind the camera? So you're taking the footage, you might have 2 or 3 hours of footage. How much then work is there behind that, editing it, processing it, backing it up? I've always been intrigued about that.
Yeah, it's another good question, Steve. Obviously things have changed massively. When I started, everything, when I was an assistant for Simon, he was shooting on film. And then that went to tape, like Betacam and stuff like that. Yeah. And then it all became small, like I can't even remember what it's called, Super 8 stuff, Super 8 tapes, and et cetera, et cetera. But then, of course, everything went digital, and then it went to discs. So we used to shoot on discs, which kind of superseded tape. And then we ended up, now we just shoot on the tiny little compact flash cards, which is mental. So the change we've seen is extraordinary. And also the cameras have changed from, they used to be literally very mechanical. Even I used to have one here, but like even like the old wind-up Bolexes, where you'd wind it, and then shoot it for certain effects. But now the camera it's literally a computer with a bit of glass on the front of it. So we've had to adjust massively to that. And with the tapes, obviously you take a tape out, and as long as you kept it somewhere where tape used to sweat. So if you're in jungle or hot climates, you had to keep it cool. You'd keep it in an esky or something like that, or a cool box. And then you'd have to be really careful where it was shipped. So if it went through, you hear famous stories about whole documentaries getting wiped by going through an airport security scanner. Or if you took a tape onto the tube in London, the underground, the magnetic forces down there could play with the tape. So so it was really high risk, to be honest. And if you think that tape that you had is the only copy you've got, you couldn't copy. Well, you could have copied tapes, but you can't carry stuff like that around. No. So today it's a lot easier in that you have a little card. You do have to back it up, but you throw it into your computer and then put it onto a hard drive like this sort of thing, like a lacy hard drive.
Yeah.
And then you can back it up on multiple of those instantaneously. And then you're away, so that means that when you do fly home, you can have people on separate flights. One will take a copy. I'll take a copy on a different flight. So if something happens, you've still got the footage. Yeah. But obviously that does take time. But and again, it comes down to budget and what we're doing. But most of the stuff I do is fairly high budget now. So we'll have a DIT like media manager who that's their sole job. So during the day they might sleep back at a hotel or something, and then we come back from a hard day out in the bush, and we'll hand them our footage, and they stay up until the early hours ingesting it and then copying it over and logging what's there. So it's changed a lot. But other than that, you've also got especially if I'm going out to Costa Rica shortly for 5 weeks, and then India before that in March. And you've got different things. So when you are in hot, humid countries, that still affects the electronics in a camera. If you get torrential, monsoon rain, if you get moisture and humidity into the camera, it hates it. Often the lenses are okay as long as you look after them. They can steam up if you're in and out of aircon, but there are tricks to get around that. But generally, the computers are never as good as it's like a car, isn't it? If you've got an old mechanical car, you can fix it with a bit of belt and a shoelace. But now they're also electrical. If it goes, you're screwed, aren't you? Similar.
Well, I've got an electric Mercedes, and to be honest, in the winter, because we have a lot of snow and it's -10, and it's been an absolute disaster. For me, because it's actually it's got a bug in it, and it actually malfunctions where it locks in gear. It won't let me. It physically won't let me put it in drive or reverse. It's locked in park, and then it just says transmission malfunction, and I have to ring Mercedes Norway. I have to ring them, then I have to turn the car off. They do an over-the-air reset, and then it will drive after so long, after 20 minutes or something. But the problem is here, you get a lot of car ferries. So I'm on a lot. You can go on a lot of boats to islands and things. Sure. If it happens on a frigging boat, I'm screwed. I'm just sat on the boat, and the boat's got to go back. So it's done that a few times. I don't want to slag Mercedes. Generally, it's a pretty decent car, but it's got this bug in it that you just can't do anything about.
But the infrastructure of that sort of thing, it can't catch up with the speed that it's evolving, can it? That's the problem.
I mean, the lucky thing is in a country like Norway that's super rich and has 5 million people, is there's an EV fast charger everywhere. Yeah. There's hundreds of them. You can't not go past an EV charger that's free. So that will work here. I would imagine in 10 years every car will be electric.
Yeah.
Because it's got the money and the so few people. But in the UK, you're never going to, in my opinion, it's a totally different market. You're just never going to be able to do it. And that was actually one of my next questions to you, was how have you sort of embraced the technology? You touched on it a little bit there, embraced the evolving technology of like GoPros. Everybody can effectively be a cameraman now.
Totally.
So how do you kind of stay at the forefront of it, and compete against that, the way that filming has gone? It's such a massive media now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm an old dog, and it's hard to teach me new tricks, because I'm just not that really interested in computers. I didn't become a cameraman to be operating a computer, So what I do is, fortunately, I'm senior enough now that I work on big budget stuff where we have good people who basically look after all the technology, and then they just hand me the camera, and I can operate it better than the next guy. So I'm totally confident in the operation of it. But when it comes to the menus, the formats, whatever, I've got, I understand it a bit. Of course I do. I haven't got an interest in it at all. So I tend to take an assistant who I know is really shit hot on all that. And then I just lean on them. I just say, look, this is the spec we need to shoot it at on these settings, these LUTs, whatever. Can you just set it up, and then I'll take over the shooting of it. So I concentrate very much on the relationship with the director, about working out how we're going to shoot, what we're going to shoot. You're entirely right about that. There are loads of benefits to technology, but you still have to go back to the basics of rudimentary storytelling in order to tell a story through moving picture. So, for example, yesterday I went and did a camera test for this Costa Rica shoot we've got coming up, and we're using a Sony FX6 camera, which is a really small, lightweight camera with a Tamron lens, and it's got really good automatic focus. So it does eye detection. So as long as it can see an eye, it locks on to that eye, and it'll just focus for you. Now, up until like last year, no professional cameraman would ever consider using autofocus. But now the technology is so good. Anyway, it's so good, but the old dog has to go out and test it before he's willing to put his faith in it. And so we took it to these woods just outside London, this forest, and we were running around and I was chasing people and just seeing if it really did what it says it does. And it's incredible. So there are benefits to it. And the reason we're doing that, by the way, is not to be lazy, but where we're going to be shooting in the jungle underfoot is so difficult that to actually move at relative speed safely as well as shooting is really difficult. But if I can put the camera on a wide shot and basically look at what I'm doing with my feet safely while just pointing in the right direction, the camera will do the work for me. So that's the beauty of it. Likewise, when I film Bear jumping out, skydiving from a helicopter or whatever, we rig the helicopter with all these different angles of GoPros. I strap a GoPro to his foot looking back up so that when he's under canopy, he's kind of looking like that, and it films his face so he can do a piece. The benefits of it are amazing. And the other thing that's interesting, I think, is I think I'm not the normal cameraman, where I know some cameramen in my kind of peer group who they've done really well, they're successful, but they're very proud about they only want to use a certain level of camera because they think that that's what they should be using because everything's perfect and whatever. I'm a believer of content is king. So I'm looking at the success of YouTube or TikTok. It doesn't matter the quality of what you shoot. It's what you shoot that matters. If you get a beautifully shot short story on YouTube, some people will watch it, and very few. There will be a few people, but only a few who will really appreciate the beautiful shots. But if you get a picture on there of something where a bomb goes off or something major happens, everybody's going to watch that, even if it's on some crappy phone, Nokia 6610 or something.
Yeah.
It's like as long as the content's there. So I'm a real believer in, you can better your camera, you can do lots of stuff to make a more beautiful shot from an artistic point of view. But at the end of the day, people will look at your work, people will enjoy your work, or people will even buy your work if the content is good. So,
I think it goes sort of back to this sort of instant gratification sort of model that we're sort of falling into nowadays, where people think, oh, if I spend, £5,000 on a Canon whatever, then I'm going to take amazing pictures. But actually, if you don't put yourself in the position to take, if you don't get your ass out of bed at 4 o'clock to get a sunrise,
right,
you can use any camera. You could use a 10-year-old digital camera.
Totally right.
If the content is there, and I think that it sort of says a lot. If it is 100% content, even with these TikToks and things that you see, 99% of it is just shit, really.
Yeah.
A lot of it. Occasionally, you'll see one sort of great little short film, or something that's got really good content on it. And obviously, nowadays, everybody is a content creator. It has just become this massive thing. And if somebody like yourself who's a professional filmmaker, let's say, I mean, I was interested. I listened to some Christopher Nolan podcasts where he used, because I watched Tenet and I watched Interstellar and watched all the films, and I was listening to I was really intrigued. I mean, I'm not a filmmaker at all, never will be, but I love the way, his passion and how he filmed things. And he uses one camera in the movie, whereas somebody like Ridley Scott with Gladiator, he's got 27 cameras filming one shot. Whereas Christopher Nolan he was saying exactly the same thing. It's the content of how well prepared we set up that shot, that camera. I mean, that's taking it to the sort of X degree, But on Expedition Mungo specifically, you seem to have you have to have a light setup, because you're in the wilderness of jungles and deserts and other things. But how do
you'd be surprised?
Yeah, well, you need generators and everything like that. But for that kind of project, do you now use that on the same kind of blueprint on other projects? Do you have your sort of all your equipment dialed in and you know exactly what your kit is?
No, you have to. I mean, there is like a kind of, cameras, like anything, like cars, they go through phases, right? Where everybody wants a 4x4, everybody wants an SUV, everybody wants an electric or a hybrid or whatever. So there are cameras of the moment where everybody uses them. And that can be because they do certain things, or that can be because they're at a certain price. So they're cheaper than the big Arri. A Sony might be cheaper, but it can pretty much do what the Arri does, but just for a cheaper option. And obviously, any industry is about money, the profit margin, the bottom line. So sometimes your cameras are dictated to you by budget. So most of them will be like Netflix has a kind of what's the word? A kind of benchmark. We only use these cameras because of the resolution, etc., etc. A kind of quality control. And then others are purely done out of access and what's the best camera for the job. So when I did Charley Boorman's thing, I literally used this really small. It was an XF305, a Canon XF305, tiny, like it looked like a kind of normal tourist camera. But put that in the hands of a seasoned professional, you can make a BBC Two 8-part documentary out of it, which we did. Whereas, in the same way, you can use an iPhone to do something, and even in broadcast TV, there is a certain amount of there are specifications and spec checks and stuff that you have to comply with in your delivery. But there are certain amounts of minicam footage you can use, which is under res, or you can use a certain amount of iPhone footage. Because I mean, coming back to your story, your point about going to buy a nice camera and think you're going to make a nice pictures. I went out and bought a Canon Mark III 5D, beautiful camera. At the time, it was like state of the art, like the thing that every stills photographer has. And I bought a few really nice lenses with it. But you know what? It was so bulky because they're big cameras. I never took it anywhere with me because it was just a ball ache to carry around another flight case. If I'm going to the park with the kids, or I don't know, going on holiday or something, what I don't want is a busman's holiday where I'm carrying around flight cases, got loads of kit to set up, and ready for the shot now, sort of thing. Whereas, I actually sold that and then went and bought an upgraded iPhone, and all my photos now are on my iPhone. And the beauty of that, and I can take great photos with this, is because it's always on me. So when one of my boys does something, I'm just like, oh, bang, I've got it, because it's right in my pocket. And obviously that's different if you are a professional doing a professional shoot of headshots or portraits or something. Then of course it's nice to have a really nice camera. But I think for everyday content, it's all about accessibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And everything's with these iPhones and Sonys, and they're all Carl Zeiss lenses, or they're all 4K, 8K.
They are phenomenal. Yeah, and quite often, I go against the grain in a way, and I think quite often I will challenge people who are doing a show, and they'll kind of say, we're doing a entertainment show, which is a very light entertainment show, but we want to use these amazing lenses or whatever, these primes and whatever, because it's got to look great. It's like, I understand that, but the average Joe Blow sitting at home eating their TV dinner don't give a shit about what it's, if they don't even know, they won't even notice if it looks nice or not. So that's more of a kind of pride, or kind of, a kind of keeping up with the Joneses type thing. But yeah.
One question I do want to ask you is on Expedition Mungo again, was how much, obviously you were at the forefront of it, but you had a sort of team around you. So it's 100% a team effort, but how much did you get involved in any post-production? Did you learn any new skills, in terms of editing it down? No,
I didn't do any post, no. The way it works for me as a cameraman is I often liken us to the cavalry.
Okay.
In that we charge in, we shoot the place up, and then we get out. And that's it. Because the way it works for crews is we'll go in there, shoot it, hand over the rushes, and then we're on to the next job. Okay. Whereas the actual editing will go on for another 3 to 6 months before it's delivered to the broadcaster. And then it could be another month before the broadcaster shows it. So when we're shooting something, I think we shot Expedition Mungo in the kind of autumn of, I can't remember when it was, 2017, I think it was. But that wouldn't have been shown on TV until 2018. It wouldn't have been launched in probably early summer the next year.
Yeah, I was interested because on one of the Forrest Galante, Extinct or Alive, he finds the Galapagos tortoise on the Galapagos Islands. He finds it after 100 years.
Right.
And they, exactly the same as you, they had a small crew, they shot everything, they found the tortoise with 2 local guys from the Galapagos. But then when it went in to be edited by, I want to say, might have been Animal. Yeah, it's probably Animal Planet because it's on Discovery, the same as your show.
Yeah.
It got edited where the 2 guys that found it basically rebelled against the way that they'd been treated in finding the tortoise, and they said, "F you, we found it. Your TV show hijacked us finding it, then edited it to make it look like Forrest found the tortoise, and it caused," and he talks about it on a podcast, it caused this real big sort of issue, and that's finding a Galapagos tortoise. It's massive.
Yeah.
So I was really intrigued to talk to you about, you know, when everything was sort of edited out and you sit down with your family, I don't know how you would do it, and you sort of watch Expedition Mungo in its final, you know, do you sort of look back on it and think, wow, that's amazing? Or were the little things when you thought, no, I'm not sure about that? Or,
I think,
did you have any feedback?
I think it's like anything. I mean, if you paint a picture, people will come over your shoulder and go, "Oh, it's great," you know. But you can always, you know, there are aspects that could always be better. When you're making a TV show, there are things that sometimes I have to shoot things that I think is rubbish because, as in, I'm not saying a lie, but just as in could have been better, or I feel is needless. But the director thinks that it's really important, so you shoot it because that's your job. So, I mean, certainly with Expedition Mungo, I didn't want anything to do with it because otherwise I'd be too worried about, you know, I don't know. I'd like to think I wouldn't be, but I'm probably worried about how I came across, or was I walking funny, or did I look weird, or do you know what I mean? Whatever. Yeah. And I just thought that's not what I'm in this for. You know, I don't want to become one of those people. So let's shoot it. I don't really want to see it, and then let's, you know, I'll watch it when it comes out. And and also, it's a real act, and as it should be, an act of delegation. I think in the same way that people say to me, "This is the show that we want to make. Will you shoot it for us?" And I'll say, "Yeah, okay. You know, what are we thinking?" And we discuss it, and then they delegate and they, you know, give me the responsibility to go and form a team, get the right crew together, and then we go and shoot it. And then, in the same way, there's a whole nother team that once, like the cavalry hand over the footage to the post department team, and then it's over to them. You know, what I hate in the past, sometimes I've had people from the post department, the editors, say, "Why didn't you get more cutaways of this or that?" And literally, I feel like throttling them because it was shitting down with rain. I had, you know, an ant crawling up my arse or something. We'd done a 17-hour day, and I hadn't eaten. You know, that's why I didn't do it. So fuck off, etc. And it never comes to that. But sometimes you just think, because you've got no idea what it's like on the ground when you're giving it everything. And yes, you missed an obvious shot, but deal with it, because there's a saying that we cameramen have, is that you can always save it in the edit. And the truth is, I mean, again, talking about technology of cameras, but the technology of editing software is phenomenal these days. Like, you know, everybody knows of Photoshop with the advertising campaigns. You know, you can have Brad Pitt, who's got acne spots or whatever, and you just take them all out, so he looks amazing. And then everybody believes that he's perfect, you know. And in the same way, you can adjust overexposed footage. You can totally recolor it if the color balance is wrong. The only thing you can't do in the edit is to focus it. So as long as it's in focus, you can save pretty much anything. And also, if you're shooting at high res now, like 8K, 6K, 4K, you can even take just a wide shot and then actually punch in, and then just use, so you can even recompose the shot to how you would prefer it if you've got the time and the money. Or you can paint stuff out. So this stuff behind me, that plant, you could just paint it out so it disappears. You know, it's just, you can do so much with the edit. And that's changed, because in the, you know, years ago, they literally had to use what was there, and it was either good or it was bad. So I think in that way, growing up in the era that I did of camera work, you really learned the true art form of it, where you had to get it or it wasn't got. Whereas now you can kind of fudge your way through it and recover bad footage.
Yeah, and it's a bit like, it's probably the equivalent of a music artist who's in a studio who hits a bum note. You can just fix the bum note. And
all the people famously singing out of tune. You get these tuning machines that can bring them. You know, some of the, you know, I worked on X Factor for years, and you hear about, you know, there's lots of pop stars out there who have used retuning software because they can't really sing, you know, and the record companies just make them sing, and then they, you know, when it comes to a live performance, they mime it because they can't really sing. Yeah, it's mental.
Milli Vanilli all over again.
Yeah.
Paul, but Expedition Mungo, you should be super proud of it. I absolutely love it. every now and again, I just I'm a bit of one of these for like rewatching things. So like River Monsters. Yeah. They say, you know, that you've got a mental disorder if you like rewatching things, because it means that you're just going back to your comfort zone. There's something about it, but every now and again, I put it on with the wife. We watched the whole thing a few weeks ago because I was making some notes and things, and she told me to tell you that you've got a very lovely voice.
Oh,
she liked your voice. That was a standout thing for
her.
us.
Really? That's nice.
Your voice comes across very well. But yeah, no, it's a super show. So what's the plans? You mentioned Costa Rica. What's coming this year for you?
Yeah, well, I'm shooting. So I mean, I've kind of with regards to being in front of the camera, I've kind of I've fallen in that hole of I'm white and I'm middle class. So people don't want me anymore, which is very true. At the moment, it's all about ticking diversity boxes. I'm not bitter about that because I support that. I think that's really important. But it does mean that people just aren't commissioning white middle class men anymore. So that's fine. I've kind of been there, got the T-shirt. Yeah, I can say I've done it, which I have. So I'm back shooting. So I'm doing this project for the BBC in India. I can't say anything more than that about it, but that'll be out next year. And then I'm off to Costa Rica to do a big Netflix show with Bear. Later on in the year. So so far so good. But it's that kind of it's that freelance life. I've been doing it for a long time. I know what's happening for the next couple of months, but after that, I've got no idea. So it's all on the wing and a prayer, really.
Yeah, and you're just networking with contacts, and I suppose in your game as well, a lot of it's not on the never, but it's on the sort of maybe never, and you're hearing about little projects coming in. You're waiting,
especially now, and I think because of the economical crisis and stuff we've had, and just the uncertainty, and then there are all the LA strikes, the writers' strikes in LA, that had a massive effect on our industry, and also the whole fact of the terrestrial TV it's a sinking ship, really, because they can't compete with the streamers, the Amazon Primes, the Netflixes, the Apple TVs. They just can't compete. And everything's on demand now, is it? I mean, I don't know anybody who watches live TV apart from sport. So I think the whole industry is changing. So I'm trying to kind of improvise and adapt within that about what my role is. I think that my safety net is the fact of that I do know my craft, and I do know how to tell a story through moving picture, be it very high budget or no budget. And because of that, I think, I know an art form that lots of youngsters who are technically very good haven't learned the art form of telling that story. So I think I'm trying to adapt into that. So I think it probably will be more content creation for people. I think that's the way it has to go, particularly brands. I mean, everybody's got to have a podcast. Everybody's got to have an online presence if you're a brand these days. So there's still a demand for that in my kind of game. But also, I don't know. I mean, part of me just wants to kind of retire and walk the dog,
Yeah, nothing beats that, but nothing kind of beats when you've got sort of 20 or 30 years of experience. It's not necessarily like you say about how to technically operate a camera. It's about the 20-hour day. It's about the mindset, getting up in the morning, getting prepared, making sure everything's set up. It's having all the 90% of things behind the camera that people just think, I want to turn a camera on and shoot. But that's 10% of it. 90% of it is the networking, talking to people. And that's something that you can't buy without experience.
That's right. That's right. And it is the experience. So I know, I went on a recce for this Costa Rica job and loads of the production people who were there had never been in a jungle ever. So they were like turning up in their plimsolls and their shorts, like as if they're going down to the gym. And then we turned up in the reception with all our jungle gear on, like boots, full kind of, trousers and long sleeves and hats and whatever, buffs. And they're like, "Oh, you're a bit overdressed, aren't you?" You kind of go, "Well, no, the opposite actually." And sure enough, they get back at the end of the day and say, "Now we understand why you're wearing that, because they got bitten, they got a thorn in their foot, they're sunburnt." It's just like so that kind of experience. And then they were saying, "Well, how do we shoot in this environment?" And you're like, "Well, shooting's the easy part, but it's about constant hydration, about snacking, about wearing the right gear on your feet." I mean, we're in this area of jungle, which is, in theory, it's quite benign. So you're walking along, and you could be in a wood in the southern counties of England. That's how it feels at times, but it's a jungle. And then you're walking along, and then suddenly you see this flash of green go in front of your feet, and it's a tree snake, which is very highly venomous. And you think that, that's a real stark reminder of where we are. So when you think about putting your bag down while you take a photo of something, or and get a load of soldier ants in it, or fire ants, then you're going to learn the hard way. Or if you kneel down or go and rest by a tree and you get a snake around your area, or a scorpion or a spider, then you're going to learn the hard way. So it's all about that experience on the outside that you kind of bring to the table.
And you and what I love as well, you're kind of building a brand in terms of, we are the specialist crew who can go into these environments. And I'm guessing it's a bit niche, because other people will think, "Oh, sod that, I'm not going to do that." So you've almost built like your own unique production crew going into these environments, and to be honest, for me, it makes the best TV, though, those kind of documentaries. I absolutely love them, where you can see the background, you can see how things are set up. It's fantastic telly. So thanks for doing it. And Mungo, I'm conscious of the time. You've got to get your kids from school, and I super appreciate your time. Thanks for taking the time to talk with me. Expedition Mungo is on Discovery Channel in Norway. I don't know what format. Can it stream in the UK still, and US and everywhere?
I can't remember which one it's on, but you can find it. Look, just put it into Google.
Discovery Plus, I think.
Right. Yeah. On YouTube as well,
Yeah, on YouTube. Yeah, brilliant, Paul. Thanks again, and good luck with everything in 2024.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, please give me a like and a subscribe via your podcast provider. If you've got any questions, or you wish to be a guest on the show, please send me a message. The best place, probably via Instagram, Aim High and Achieve Podcast. Thank you.